Our industry is kind of built on showing up at the end and making the technology work. We brought a new perspective to what we do.
Values and how that plays in to the team here.
If we make every decision in those 5 core values, we'll never make a bad one.
Feels like just the right time before everything starts going vertical.
There's lots of projects that put us on the map, but Ledger's the one. It stretched us too.
Y'all have had opportunities to be acquired, so why haven't you done that?
Construction's taking twice as long as it used to take. As the technology guy kind of watching from the outside of the projects, it's clear to me what the problem is, that we can...
We want to give a special thanks to our presenting sponsor, Greenwood Gerhardt. Starting with my parents, for years, they've helped my family feel at peace by having a team we can trust build our finances for the future. One thing I love about Greenwood Gerhardt is how directly involved the team is in the holistic planning of our finances. We can regularly check in with our advisor and know that they see the full picture of our family, even between generations. I know they're adding immense value to so many lives here in Northwest Arkansas. And to learn more about Greenwood Gerhardt and their suite of services, you can visit their website at greenwoodgerhardt.com or hit the link in the show description. Now, let's dive into the episode.
John Musser, Custom Electronics. What a beautiful office space we're in this morning here in Lowell. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for coming in.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to kind of go through everything y'all do, but first, I think outside looking in, so you're in what may seem kind of blue collar as from an installation standpoint, but it's a technology business too. Right. What are the challenges there navigating both silos?
Yeah, the challenges are also the benefits, that we are in a very white glove, high tech industry. Most of our technicians probably assume they're going to end up at Google and have a ping pong table in their office and all. And the reality is that our secret sauce is that we work like brick masons. We just happen to do technology.
Mm. And it has to work too.
It's your reputation hinges on that executive's video conferencing work or the audio being on in the lobby of the hotel. So, the cool thing is that technology just continues to reinvent itself.
Sure.
So I have 24 years experience now in it. Wow. And the stuff that I knew 22 years ago doesn't matter. The stuff that I knew 10 years ago doesn't matter. So, yeah.
And I mean, in that process, after installation, I imagine is there an onboarding process for most of these larger jobs?
Yeah.
Kind of getting going.
Customer education is the hardest part of what we do. I've said it several times that I should have been board a concrete guy because nobody forgets how to use their sidewalk. And, that really drives the quality of the project. We can nail it on design. The guys can nail it on installation. But if the people don't know how to use it, then we end up struggling.
Yeah. Give an overview of the different silos of the business. So there's, I guess, audio and video is one, and what are the...
So we're a residential and commercial integrator. On the residential side, there's home alarm, audio, automation, thermostats, door locks, garage door integration, and then Wi-Fi, obviously, is one of the most important now. On the commercial side, it holds those same scopes, but then you introduce life safety. So elevator integration, fire alarm, access control, shooter detection systems.
Oh, wow.
School lockdown, and then the fun part, the audio, the video conferencing systems.
Yeah. So. Yeah. And just everyone listening, life safety, that's just like every municipality, it's part of regulation. They've got to have it in their building, correct?
Right. Yeah. It's the one thing that's required.
Yeah.
So as budgets continue to cut, the fire marshals are going to say what the fire marshals want.
Yeah.
And the fire marshals are getting more educated in Northwest Arkansas. When we first cut our teeth, the fire marshals didn't understand the code and they depended on us quite a bit. But over time, the fire marshals are becoming more educated.
Yeah.
And fire alarm's kind of the gateway into the other technology. So one of the sales tactics that we've seen used in the past was get the fire alarm. Then when you're on site, the GC is going to want you to be the one doing the rest of the scopes.
You're already out there.
You're already
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
We don't want to manage 2 of them.
We trust you.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So talk about the beginning of the company, and then also kind of the beginning of your story. So there's two other founders, correct?
Yeah, there's 2 other partners. They are the founders. Yeah. Their name is Victor and Daphne Gurrell. I think that their story is far more impressive than mine. You know, those kind of bushwhacking, bootstrapping days to get it started.
When was that?
So they incorporated in 2008.
Okay.
As a residential integrator, and kind of built on the backs of the booming construction market.
Yeah.
You know, our industry was new to residential construction. You know, you would have the electrician pull a couple pieces of cable where you think you might want a TV.
And that was it.
Yeah, and the HVAC guy would put a thermostat in, but the idea that we would want to use an app at some point wasn't there. So I joined the company in 2014. I think Victor and Daphne had a strong desire to get into commercial, and commercial was my background.
And where'd you grow up? Where are you from? How did you get to there?
Yeah, so I grew up in Springdale, I would say. My family moved to Springdale in 1994.
Okay.
I was raised prior to that up and down the East Coast. My dad was in the Navy. They kind of just put their finger on the map and chose Northwest Arkansas.
Wow.
Yeah, our family's roots are in central Louisiana, and they knew for sure they didn't want to go back there. And then we had some more family in the Springfield area.
Okay.
And I think the story my mom tells is that they vacationed at Devil's Den when I was a baby, and then went through the Navy. We moved a lot up and down the East Coast, and then settled back here.
Oh,
so
what a story! And so yeah, they settled here. You grew up here. Grew up in Springdale.
Yeah, I grew up on Elm Springs Road in Springdale. Different Springdale back then.
Was it paved back then?
Yeah, it was. We actually lived right next to 49, and 49 was obviously 71 at that time, and then became 540. But my bedroom window was, 25 feet from one of the lanes on 540 at the time. Yeah, and that time on the East Coast is what really kind of shaped me. We grew up in very, very diverse Navy towns. And some of them were rough places to live. And I think I have an older brother, and he and I kind of accustomed to being in lots of different cultures. The Navy brought lots of people from lots of areas. And then, in our last stop in Goose Creek, South Carolina, he and I were the minority. And fast forward, my parents moved us to Springdale, Arkansas. And so a little bit of culture shock in the 7th grade at Central Junior High. Met some good friends and kind of settled in.
Wow. So. And did you go to college? You kind of start working afterwards?
No, I barely made it through high school. I joined a work study program, which at the time was for troubled kids that weren't going to graduate high school if they didn't, and got a job as a electrical helper at the old Washington Regional Hospital on North Street.
Okay.
So I'd say my electrical career started then.
And is that how most people get into the industry? They go an electrician route, or
it is now. I think Springdale Schools in particular is doing a great job with their workforce study program. They're churning a lot of good talent out that knows it. When I was in high school in the late 90s, you went in the trade if you weren't smart enough or dedicated enough to do anything else, and we've seen a change in that.
Yeah, what do you think about that? Like your kids? I forget how old you said they were. Yeah. Do you want them to be in college, or did you say, hey, just go work? Or what's
so I have a 22-year-old son. He's actually down the hall right now in the project manager's office, and he knew right out of school that he wanted to be in the trades. I also have a 10-year-old son who thinks he's going to be in the MLB one day, and is. I don't know what his path will be.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that's happening right now is that we've had this shift from everybody needs to go to college into the modern times now where it's everybody should join a trade. And the right answer's somewhere in between. I think Springdale's program's doing a great job. They have a signing day every year for people that are joining the trade.
Really?
Yeah,
That's cool.
So we get a table and have our banner on it, and I think we took 6 out of that program last year.
Cool.
We hope to take a dozen this year, and those 6 are still here.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a really Springdale's kind of leading the charge on the workforce studies.
That's amazing.
So
back to your story, you got out of high school, went to work, electrician, or kind of, I don't know, you call it apprentice at Washington Regional.
Yeah, it's a wild story. So I grew up in a house that didn't have excess income, and I was destined to make it in a trade, and kind of climbed through the state-driven apprenticeship program. And I took a job with National Home Centers.
What is that?
It's a kind of a builder supply company based in Springdale at the time. It became called Stock after that. It was sold during the recession to Stock. But we were doing a job for National Home Centers. I was an electrical apprentice, and I got to know some of the leaders from National Home Centers, and they actually offered me a job in leadership as a 23-year-old. At the time, granite countertops were becoming a thing, and they were going to start building granite countershops all over the state.
Okay.
And so I went from the blue-collar side to the white-collar side, went through a divorce at that time, and got out of the trade.
Okay.
And then on a Tuesday, everything fell apart in Northwest Arkansas. We saw the fall of a builder that created the fall of a bank that just kind of made us all open our eyes to how much supply we had, and there wasn't enough demand. So I was called in and told, hey, you're going to be the first one of a lot, but today's going to be your last day at National Home Centers.
Wow.
And I ran back to the trades after that.
And was that in 08 or 09?
That would have been in 08.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, went back into doing electrical. I think one thing that isn't talked about enough is what a crutch the Pinnacle Promenade was at that time. So the Hunts had developed that area. They had all of the core and shell up. Nobody could find any work anywhere, but these nationwide companies still needed to put in. So we pivoted from houses into the Gap and the Banana Republic and things like that. And it gave Northwest Arkansas about 9 months of runway after the housing market collapse.
Of work to be done.
That's
There's
right.
at least something out there.
That's right.
Yeah.
Then I left doing that and joined the low voltage industry. And in 2009, there was no electrical work to be had. And one thing that happens when the economy drops is that crime raises. And so I went to work for a local alarm company doing cameras and fire alarm and security alarm, and never looked back.
And that company, was that Custom Electronics?
No, that was a different company. Yeah, it's a Fort Smith based company.
Yep.
Been around for 50 years, still does a great job. But as a result of my childhood, my parents taught me how to work, but they didn't know business that well. And I was destined to be a businessman in my mind. So I started going into but I think when you're in your 20s and you're in Northwest Arkansas and you get to see people like JB driving around, it kind of plants a seed in you of what greatness looks like.
Anything's possible.
Anything's possible, but you don't understand the work that goes into that anything's possible. So fast forward to 2011, I had left the job with the alarm company and was destined to be Warren Buffett. I got into cattle farming. I had an antique store in downtown Springdale. I'd bought out a lighting store. I was building a house. I was doing whatever I thought it looked like to be an entrepreneur, without any reference for, I think the great ones pick a lane and stay in it. and I was swerving all over the highway.
Yeah.
So met my wife in 2012. I think she was immediately intrigued by all of the stuff that I was doing, but shortly realized that it wasn't that cool. And
he's not around that much.
Yeah, well, not only is he not around, he's betting the house every
Yeah.
3 months on some new venture. And she came from a family that was long tenured career, a lot of educated folks in that family, and she didn't give me an ultimatum, but she did say, "Hey, it'd probably be cool if you had a job." And so got back into the industry. Actually went back to Alert Alarms and said, "Hey, I'll take another swing at it," and started doing fire alarm again. I was building a house in Pinnacle when I met my wife, and I asked the architect for a low voltage guy, and he gave me Victor's number, the owner of Custom Electronics, and Victor showed up and we kind of hit it off, and then went our separate ways, and then had a connection a couple of years later where I knew he was wanting to get into commercial, and so we started the conversations.
And for people who don't know what low voltage mean, what does that mean?
Yeah, it's kind of a buzzword of everything that connects to a piece of cable other than your basic electricity.
So dumb it down. In that house in Pinnacle, what was Victor there to do?
In that house in Pinnacle, at that point, home theaters were a big deal. So the homeowner wanted a pretty good audio system. Wi-Fi was just coming on at that point strong, and we needed somebody to come pull cable and put speakers in and make the home theater work.
Cool.
So, yeah.
Did you ever feel like a failure getting a job? Where you're saying, like, I don't know, that's some of the words you used it, but like, or was it kind of from the get-go when you and Victor met, it was like, hey, this is going to be somewhat of a partnership scenario?
Yeah, it I was hired in a role called commercial sales. There was no partnership at all. It was a job where I was going to get in and grind. And when I first got here, I don't know what our head count was, somewhere around 10. And I started on a Friday. I'm not real sure why I started on a Friday, but I quickly learned the culture of the company was just to grind. So my first day I sat down and started learning the systems. And what had happened was that one of our partners, Daphne, had done a fantastic job of acting like we were a lot bigger company than we were. So the CRM was in place. The accounting software was in place. It was really built to launch at that point. So the founding of the company is you've got an old satellite installer who was a millwright at one point and a framer at one point and a tree planter and a mechanic. And he brought that, we're just going to outwork this issue every time. And then Daphne, who was going to keep it all together. As time progressed, she would say, you guys riding a speedboat and I paddle a canoe behind, picking up the things that fly out.
Wow.
And still to this day, that's been a great, I'd say, partnership. The partnership officially began in the early 20s, 21, 22. But yeah, I saw something that would allow me to have the stability that my wife wanted and have some health insurance and a steady paycheck while also feeding that entrepreneurial spirit to grow something.
What would you tell someone who's evaluating an opportunity like that?
Yeah, don't shy away from stability. I think that there's lots of opportunities in Northwest Arkansas to run your own small business inside of a business. That happens a lot in sales more than anything. But whatever vertical somebody chooses, if you can settle in and then grind as hard as possible, it always works out really well. Now I know now what those struggles look like back in the day. I was trying my hardest to grow our commercial side of the business at that point, but I didn't think about how much payroll cost on Friday or what the truck insurance was like. And that was a real luxury for me. I was able to focus on the projects and the customers and keep things moving that way.
So talk about, before we dive more into your story, talk about those early days. Victor and Daphne, you said 2008 was roughly when the company was founded.
Yeah.
You talked a little bit about their DNA, but like the story you gave us out there of Victor driving around, share like how the company started.
Yeah,
what they had, how much they had to spend, what that, just back then, what was going on.
Yeah. So the story that I've been told by both of them was that there was Victor was a satellite installer with Dish Network, and he would be doing satellite installations, and then the homeowner would say, "Hey, I've got this new amplifier. Can you help me connect it?" Or, "I would really like to have speakers on my porch." And so he started to create this, for better term, side hustle that ran alongside installing satellites. And then in 2008 decided to take the leap. And the story I've been told is that he borrowed a truck from a brother-in-law and went to a local distributor and got some boxes of cable, and then started driving neighborhoods, calling builder signs and saying, "Hey, this structured cabling part of a house is a new thing. Can I wire that house?" Mm-hmm. And so, and we've done a fantastic job. Even today, we still have those same builders here. That's cool. One of the kind of most shocking things about custom electronics when I got here is that I had some struggles in 2008 and 9 in the recession. Victor had been in an industry previously, or in this industry previously, that didn't work out. A strong aversion to debt. And still to this day, this company's moved at the speed of cash. We've never taken debt to create growth. There's never been a line of credit that allowed that one bad month of February to need to make payroll. So from that first borrowed truck now to our 54th truck, this thing's moved 100% at the speed of cash. And our fleet looked like it for a long time. When you need the self-generated profits of the company to continue growth, what you have to do is, one, not suck at dry of resources, and two, be very, very smart with the purchases. So our fleet looked like a well-lettered, really bad used car lot for a while. We'd buy a Toyota one day and a Ford the next day. And still to this day, if the team comes and says, "Hey, we're going to need 4 new trucks," well, we're going to have to figure out how to fund those 4 new trucks on our own, because debt is still something that's not found its way into custom electronics.
And how did you respond to that? I mean, you already talked a little bit about your appetite for risk, and your wife now noticing that as maybe not a problem back then, but just something different that she was used to. So talk about how those collisions happened, your appetite for risk and that aversion to debt.
Well, I had an appetite for risk and an aversion to debt. I tell folks often that I got my MBA on the courthouse steps in downtown Fayetteville. That I knew at that point that my personality alongside debt wasn't going to work. So I tried to live my life debt-free in the same way. So from that, and in our negotiations of coming to work at Custom Electronics, he had explained how important Dave Ramsey had been to them and how they lived life in an envelope system, cash flowing everything they could. And that was actually one of the draws that brought me to the company. So
that's cool. Yeah. So those early days, Victor's driving around in a truck, just grinding it out. And that's where the grind starts.
Yeah. And really the market was wide open at that point for somebody to grind it out. And it still is. This is a very soft-handed industry. It's not looking to work. The electrician pulls a lot of our conduits and gets our strings in place. And our industry is kind of built on showing up at the end and making the technology work. And so you take a guy who grew up in electrical and a guy who grew up as a millwright and a framer, and we brought a new perspective to what we do. We lead with grit and determination. Our team looks like it. So he added a couple staff members in the second year. It was just him and Daphne at first, and a couple of those are still here. I think we have 2 employees who predate me at Custom Electronics. And just demand would drive hiring, and he would go find somebody to help.
And when you joined in 2014, there's 10 employees.
Ish. I'm not real sure.
Yeah. And your main initiative was, let's figure out this commercial business.
Right. Yeah, my personal goal was to take 10% of the revenue and convert it to commercial annually. So I got in midstream in 14 in July. Had a good relationship with a hometown grocer in town. I think I started on a Friday, and 2 weeks later we did our first grocery store for Harps. And so every year that was the goal: take 10% of this residential and turn it into commercial. And there were several reasons why. One, we were still in somewhat of a housing recession. But our residential customers, one of the things that hurts a lot of companies like ours is you either have to scale or you have to die. Because if I do your house in 2014, I get all of the revenue you have to give at that point, but you still need me in 15, 16, and 17 to make sure that system's functioning and that your investment's there. And so we were struggling to have talent to go do installs because we were spending all of our time servicing the installs we had already done. And technology's tough. It is not paint or concrete in a set it and forget it kind of way.
How much? And in those, like the installs 2014, I mean, is it like an every 5 year, every 10 year? How often does the home need to turn over some of that technology?
Yeah, that really depends on the homeowner. You know, you get a certain homeowner who always wants to be out in front of the technology. We've got Control4 systems from 2012 that are still limping along. You know, those create some tough conversations, you know, that, hey, this stuff was out when iPhone had iPhone 4. We should probably upgrade. But
the apps have changed.
Yeah, the apps. You know, I'll tell you, I remember a conversation in 2014 when Control4 came out with an app, and I was sitting with Victor and one other guy, and I said, hey, we got to stay away from this app thing. Apps are never going to make it. The customers need a hard remote. They need to control it.
You said this?
Yeah. Yeah. And now everything we do is driven by an app. But yeah, I remember saying, you know, this phase of apps will go away.
Yeah.
What we need to be doing is selling hard, clunky remotes for people to use.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So. Talk about 2014. I mean, everyone now, Northwest Arkansas is on the map. Everybody knows what's going on. But when you look at the landscape of Pinnacle, when you look at the landscape of Bentonville, when you look at the landscape of Fayetteville back in 2014, what was there? What was going up? You know, like, and there's a little bit that feels like just the right time before everything starts going vertical. So
yeah, there was a lot of cow pastures left between our office here in Lowell and downtown Bentonville, and it was an exciting time to be in it. You know, one of the challenges was when you're growing at the speed of cash, which we've always wanted to do, you can't build for the growth that you want. You have to fix that plane mid-flight. And so I would sit with architects and general contractors and try my hardest to convince them that, hey, we could handle this 7-story building. Like, we're built for this. And if they ever looked behind the curtain, they'd know we weren't built for that. And grind got us through that. Grind created the profits that allowed us to continue to hire folks. So when the promenade happened, you know, that all set on the east side of what is now 49. And there wasn't much on the west side. My first construction site as an apprentice was the hotel there in Pinnacle. I can't think of the name of it. The Embassy Suites. Yeah. So I'm a Baptist kid who's never been on a construction job site. I get on this hotel. I saw a safety instance where a guy passed away right in front of me. I did, you know, I was thinking, boy, this construction thing might not be for me. And then once Embassy Suites happened, that would have been in 2003. It just kind of set for a little while until, you know, the Hunts did the tower next to it. And then I think when when JB passed in 08, that was kind of his vision for what all that was going to be. So we saw in 2012, we saw the 10-story get built. And I think, Marshall and Tom could talk better about this, but that 10-story was the anchor for everything that happened around it. We had the neighborhood, we had the hotel and the original Hunt Tower there. But once the 10-story happened and then got to capacity quick, we saw it explode. It's been fun to take that journey. I saw the picture a couple months back of 2004 versus 2024, and it's wild. And now we get the opportunity, and our staff gets the opportunity to drive past and say, hey, at that amp, we were involved in the Kellogg's building or the General Mills building. We've been really blessed to be a part of most of that growth.
This is a probably more technical question, but when you build a building like that and you put however many dollars of technology into it, do they just budget for, like, they know in 10 years this $5 million we put into this building is going to be at, like, how does that work?
Yeah, well, they don't budget for it at all. I wish they would, and they're starting to. The keyless approach to entry to a building was kind of the driving force behind it. We had fire alarm, which was a requirement, and the first non-necessity that came out was the key fob system. And I had been doing key fob systems for a long time, but you saw them primarily in hospitals or schools. And once developers started to realize, rekeying this building every time somebody's terminating is going to be a real problem. So access control was the second scope to kind of hit hard, alongside cameras, I would say. Fast forward now, it's a expectation. The talent that we're trying to bring to Northwest Arkansas is coming from buildings that have all of this technology in it already. And we'll talk about Ledger, but the push for technology in buildings really got going in probably 2017, but we still weren't seeing budgets. We were seeing it as FF&E. We were seeing it as an afterthought, and it's hard in our industry. You're the last man in for rough out or for rough in, and you're the last man out at the end. And so because of that, the GCs are exhausted and the owners are exhausted, and there's no more money to spend, and everything's over budget. So you had to get creative on what you were selling. And we started in 2019 to really try to focus on the architects. We would have meetings with architects and say, hey, this stuff's going to be a requirement of this building. And if I tell you that we're going to have this digital directory in the elevator lobby, well, then the electrician's going to have power there. And there's this nasty change order game that's happening in construction right now, where it's a bid it where you can cover your cost and then make all of your profit on the change orders. And so we started to convince architects to allow us to be on the design teams. It was a cool feeling because at that point they're asking you for your brain, not your back. And so your years of experience and what you knew the building needed. So we went and hired some Revit technicians and some AutoCAD technicians and started sitting in the pre-con stuff with the architects to make sure that the technology was on the construction documents before it came out.
It's cool. So it allows them to better at least anticipate the cost. Right. Maybe not budget for them, but anticipate it.
That's right. Okay. And the architects are incredibly sensitive about what the speakers look like and how they line up with the other things in the ceiling. And if we can get in the Revit model early enough, we can coordinate all that now.
It's cool.
And was that, I guess the pre-con initiative, pre-development initiative, was that really pushed by the Ledger? Or was that kind of happening beforehand?
It first started probably a year and a half before the Ledger. I think the first major design that we were involved in would have been the Tri-Delta House on the campus in Fayetteville. Construction in Northwest Arkansas is very seasonal, meaning that there's a flavor of the week every year. This year's flavor of the week was hotels. It seemed like every conversation was about a hotel, and it was multifamily the year before that, and it was food and beverage the year before that. And COVID kind of pushed some of those things backwards to allow enough demand yeah, it seemed like every email we got was about a hotel over the last couple of years.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Kind of walk through. So 2014 comes on. When does the buckle the seatbelt? Like we're kind of taking off, because it seems like the growth since 2014 has been exponential.
Right.
And
yeah.
is there somewhere in your head where you're like, this project, like this is when we started this, it just feels like everything kind of started rolling from there?
Yeah. There's a lot of those. We did a Wesley Foundation building in 2015 on the campus in Fayetteville. And without a marketing budget and still moving at the speed of cash, you had to lean in hard on the relationships you created along the way. And so, 15 tells the story of that. And then 16, we got into the healthcare side of assisted living and memory care. So that really drove 16. And then 17, we saw this spike in Greek housing at the university. 18 starts to push hard with Hunt Ventures in the Kellogg's building. 19 is when the talks first started about Ledger. And it seems like every project was a stepping stone to a bigger project, but solely based on the relationships that happened in those. We've still to this date, our marketing budget includes lettering the trucks and a couple community outreach things. We've got a very strong Hispanic culture inside of our company. I think cooking tacos for the Rule of 3 bike race or the bike races that are happening in town. Victor's very passionate about cycling. But I heard my good buddy Zweig say that if your marketing idea is word of mouth, then that means you don't have a marketing idea. But it's what's gotten us here. We've never been big on spending those dollars on getting more business.
Well, it seems to me like, and I think we have interviewed founders on both sides of this coin. Right. So respect to both of the perspectives. But one of the perspectives is like sales market, go knock on doors, go send flyers, go market, go push. And then the other side of the coin is like, we're going to freaking execute. Right. We're going to execute. We're going to deliver, whether it's the best brisket you've ever had or the best coffee you've ever had or the best electronics inside of a facility. Like, we're just going to execute. And I'm not saying one is better than the other, but it sounds like that's kind of the side of the token that y'all are from. And was that in the DNA from Victor? Was that just kind of how you guys adapted over time, or where do you think that came from?
Yeah, everything's in the DNA from Victor and Daphne, but it was more out of necessity. Growth is expensive, and you can use those profit dollars to buy more trucks and train more humans, or you can spend them on marketing. And so I don't think there was a decision to be made. We didn't have any money to spend on marketing. Mm-hmm. So kind of in the same way with Jordan, if you put a great product out there, one of my favorite quotes in business, I don't remember who said it, but if the dogs don't like your dog food, the packaging doesn't matter. And we just always tried to make sure that we had the best dog food possible. And now we needed to polish up on the packaging. We needed the trucks to look better. But yeah, it was more out of necessity than anything else.
That's cool.
So,
well, I want to talk about some of these just iconic Northwest Arkansas projects. Yeah. Well, let's talk about the Ledger.
Sure.
Talk about your involvement in it. Kind of how did the conversation start at the beginning in the design process with y'all to the end?
That conversation starts at the university. We did a small housing project or a small part of a big housing project with Modus, right next to Bud Walton, and they needed a small production room, needed some AV in it, and Nabholz just happened to be the GC on that. So, normal fashion, we went and did the job. Our ability to do what we said we were going to do struck that particular project manager well. And he called and said, hey, we've got this project in Bentonville called WeWork, and we've got this 900-page spec book for the AV, and will you take a look at it and see what happens? So Victor and I got together, had a couple meetings with some architects out of New York, and read the spec and decided that we could deliver exactly what they were asking for. And at the time, what they were asking for was in the first security building in downtown, they were taking the second floor and turning it into a model for the ledger, or what would become the ledger. And so they wanted to test chairs and test drink beverage machines and all of that. So we follow the spec, we put the equipment in, the project comes to the end, and I'm down at Baum Stadium one day, and our project manager calls and says, "Hey, there's this IT guy here at Ledger's showroom, and he's taking all of our stuff out. And he kind of looks like Jesus, and I think you probably should get up here pretty fast." So I raced from the university to that space, and I climbed the stairs, and sure enough, there's a guy behind the TV just pulling parts out. And I said, "Hey, buddy, I don't know who you are, but you better take your hands off of that stuff." And he turned around and said, "Hi, I'm Josh Kiles. I'm the developer of the Ledger, and this is all terrible technology. We don't want this stuff in." And from that point forward, it created a bond between Josh and I that we ended up getting on the design team. We sat in Revit for 2 years planning the Ledger, deciding where speakers would be and what rooms were going to have what technology. And the IT guy that looked like Jesus and I have become pretty good friends out of it. But that project, there's lots of projects that put us on the map. I would say the Baseball Performance Center at Baum was a big one for us. But Ledger's the one. Ledger's the one that kind of put us in a spot where we didn't think we could fit. It stretched us too. We finished Ledger in 22. That was an 86% growth year. And 86% is too much. You can't stomach 86% growth.
Everyone feels it.
Everyone feels it. It created a really scrappy 23, because the one thing that's never happened at this company is whatever pushed us to grow, we've needed to catch up with next year. And 23 was a weird year. That's when we started seeing interest rates playing around. And I think our average transaction cost was tiny in 23. It was a really scrappy year for us. But Ledger gave us the portfolio that we never had. We started getting our name called for whether it be Project Peloton or Crystal Bridges or some of the things with the Compton Hotel. But in each of those, we've had a seat at the design table, making sure that we were getting the right technology in the construction drawings.
So when you're at the design table, are you hiring someone who's an architect by trade or someone who is an electrician by trade, or you are training them up?
No, it's the same bootstrap mentality. Our first Revit technician was a kid who wanted to be a video game designer in Fort Smith.
Wow. And
we taught him Revit, and he took off on Revit. And then we took some internal resources and turned them into Revit technicians. And that's the story of custom electronics, is that we've used talent that didn't know that they had it and brought them to the table and then poured resources into them.
Talk about that. I mean, we walk through the office, there's pictures here of guys. I mean, and you can talk through some of those pictures, maybe why they're important to you, but talk through, and if you want to use numbers, someone who started here making $10 an hour and now they're making X, like just for someone who's listening who doesn't know if they want to go to college or doesn't even know when people talk about trades, like what's even out there. I mean, just kind of talk about that.
Yeah. So when we really started growing in 16 and 17, kind of the playbook for talent was to take everybody else's talent. And so we would use relationships that we had, try to get technicians from other companies to come join. And what I learned was that if you can take somebody's technician, there's a reason they'll let that technician go. And probably mid-17, we changed our hiring strategy to where if you know how to work, we can teach you technology. And so I started looking around at landscapers and concrete guys and chicken plant workers. I would be at a gas station, and the speed at which a guy would get out of his truck to the gas pump let me know that he was in a hurry, and I would walk over and offer him a job. So right now we're running somewhere mid-70s on technical staff, just over 100 on total staff. And I think there are three 3 employees of Custom Electronics that had industry experience before they got here. And I'm one of them. Because you can't teach somebody how to work. You can't teach work ethic or grind. And because technology reinvents itself so often, what we do is an easy skill to teach. So,
man, talk about the life change. Maybe it's a person who's in this office.
Yeah. I mean, so the office right next to me actually is who I would consider to be my right hand man. His name's Adrian Soto. In the early grind, he started in 2015, and he was my apprentice. And back then, I would have to make a deal, sell a job, design the job, go install the job, and then sit at my kitchen table at night and make the invoice for it. And Adrian was by my side through the whole thing. And he grew over the years to become an industry expert. He's our senior project manager. He's ultimately responsible for about 80% of our staff. His job prior to Custom Electronics was in a poultry plant. So, fast forward, I think Adrian's first hourly rate was $12. He's well over 6 figures now. But we had a moment in a poultry plant in Gentry a couple months ago where we were called on to come look at some system types. And there was a moment where I turned around and I could just see the glow in his face of what life change had been at Custom Electronics. He sees very hardworking folks processing chicken on a production line. And I think there was a lot of self-reflection in him at that point. And a lot of our senior leadership team is that way. They come from operating a forklift in a warehouse or pouring concrete or being a landscaper. And we've created a place for people's lives to change.
Yeah. Talk about your leadership team, and then before we jumped on, you mentioned a lot about values and how that plays in to the team here.
Yeah. So we established core values in 2017. There's 5 of them. I have them actually tattooed on my hand as a reminder of if we make every decision in those 5 core values, we'll never make a bad one. So humility, efficiency, dependability, generosity, and excellence. So when it's time to offboard somebody or onboard somebody, if you lead with those 5 core values, you never get them wrong. We found out that they spelled the word hedge at some point, but efficiency is the one that leads. This is a hard place to work. It's a place where the grind is expected.
You tell people that on the front end?
We do. Yeah. I don't get a chance to talk to them much anymore, but I think the message is even louder when it's not coming from me. And it's not for everybody. This is probably the most rewarding place to work that I could know of. We're generous to a fault. We take a percentage of top line revenue and give it back to the team every year in the form of Christmas bonuses. We create opportunity for these folks, but in exchange, we expect hustle.
Yeah.
And if we always remember that our roots are in construction and attack every problem. We've got a saying called Ponte las pilas, and you'll see it on people's T-shirts walking around here. The English translation of Ponte las pilas is charge your batteries, but in the Mexican culture, it's something that the mother or father would say to the kid when they wanted them to get out of bed or get their homework done or something like that. And that sure effort, or, I like to say that I have an obsession with urgency, is summed up in those one statement. But that's true in accounting. That's true in HR. That's true in the warehouse. It's not just a phrase for somebody to pull cable faster or dig a ditch harder. It's really in our DNA. And because of that, it's not for everybody.
What was the cue in 2017? Hey, it's time to, I don't know if you already had the values identified or if it was like, hey, we need to get some, write them down. What was?
Yeah, I think Victor and Daphne attended a Entree Leadership Summit with Dave Ramsey, and I think there was a big talk on core values. And it's hard to sum that up into 5 core values. And so it was probably a 1.5 year long process before those were actually put on paper. I think we nailed it. I think that we can take humility to mean lots of different things. To me, it means not thinking less of yourself, but thinking about yourself less. That's probably the greatest example I can give up to these people. We don't need our salespeople to lead with humility. We need our human resources department to lead with humility, or the guy running parts to the job. But it doesn't mean a lack of confidence.
Yeah,
for sure.
Is it ever too late to identify some values? Or,
I don't think it's ever too late. I think if you stand on top of those 5 values, you need to bolt some on over time. I think that if the way that you view your core values as a set it and forget it, you kind of lose sight of society. The reality is that society is pushing out into the market less and less folks who understand the value of hard work.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be the old man in the company that's saying back in my day, but it's true. The value of an honest, hard day's work doesn't mean what it meant when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. And so we've got to be strategic on who we hire. There's the state and federal government gives a bunch of guidelines on what you're allowed to ask in an interview process. But if you can find that kid whose dad was a brick mason, who had a great example of how to work, you can take him anywhere you want to take him.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Well, I want to get up to kind of the now.
Yeah.
What you kind of mentioned employee count, over 100 employees now.
That's right.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I mean, give us some other metrics, whether it be like, hey, number of jobs y'all do now, or just like how have the size of jobs changed? Just like, I mean, y'all are doing a lot.
Yeah, we're moving as many mountains as we can. I think marketing released some statistics at the end of the year, just fun stuff to know, like 19,000 hours of overtime worked, or 33,000 gallons of fuel used, or whatever data they can get their hand on, number of speakers or feet of wire pulled. To really talk scale, we have to talk about subdividing the company, and that's been a kind of a cultural drag over the last couple of years, is that we have to acknowledge that whatever substructure was built in place where I knew everybody's name, I did all the interviews, I did all of the annual reviews, you eventually outgrow those metrics. And, there are young men that walk through the warehouse on a daily basis and say hello to me, and I have to get good at using words like buddy or pal, because I've never seen that guy before. And it's awkward. It's strange for us, but the headcount growth is probably the greatest metric that we use. The projects are growing in size, but I think construction costs are driving that more than anything. Our name's getting called for very, very impressive and large projects at this point, and so it helps to grow that headcount. But the problem with the very, very large projects is that construction's taking twice as long as it used to take. So we talk about designing ledger in 19, starting construction in 20, and finishing construction in 22. There's a part of this current undertone in construction where that would be a 4-year project now.
Yeah.
And there's some identity issues happening right now with the speed of which projects are moving. I think that, as the technology guy kind of watching from the outside of the projects, it's clear to me what the problem is, that we can get a project out of the ground quick, we can get it in the dry, but once the piecework part happens, so your insulators, drywall hangers, tapers, painters, those guys, all their skill set fits on residential as well. So you can entice them with 10 cents more a square foot in commercial, but you got to have a lot of capital to move one of these projects along. Our average day to pay on a construction pay-up project's over 70 days right now. And when you're competing with residential single family where you do it on Tuesday and get paid on Friday, the extra 10 cents a foot isn't worth it. So we've got to work on being able to speed up the middle of the project, where the talent crosses over between residential and commercial easier. So I don't think I answered your question at all, but that was my soapbox.
It was good.
Yeah.
It was really good.
Talk through the different parts of the company. I know we talked a little bit about residential versus commercial and just the size of that business.
Residential's about 8% of our company now. We've still got a small team doing residential electrical. Commercial's the engine that's driving the thing right now. I would like to have more of the residential work. I think there's a big push in 26 to create more opportunity in residential. We didn't turn our back on it, and there's a lot of months where residential kind of floats the ship along. The average day to pay on a residential job's 3 days. Average day to pay on a commercial 70 days. So we need that trickle of revenue in a cash flow company to keep applying. Design is a big upcoming scope for us right now. We've learned that our knowledge fits, particularly with this AI push that's going on in town, where we can scale fast on putting somebody in front of a computer and filling them full of institutional knowledge to just work on projects that we'll never design. I was in the Walmart. Our Walmart team utilizes our old office now. There's probably 10 designers over there working. And they're working on a super center in New Jersey or a Sam's Club in Arizona. And these are projects we'll never physically step in. And I think one of the big things that's happening right now in technology is that at a retail setting, AI only happens 2 ways. It happens with a POS system or a surveillance camera. And so a lot of old technology in a lot of retail sectors where they're wanting that gender-based data or height-based data or average head count walking down an aisle after 4 p.m., and they need modern cameras to do so. So, AI is a complicated story to tell in business. I think that it's a story that's existed forever. If you see the photos of what the banking industry looked like in the 1800s, where there's 25 dudes with pen and paper running ledgers, and then calculators replaced that, and then typewriters replaced the handwriting and so forth. And that's where we're at right now. It seems a bit accelerated, but we like to think that we're on the right side of AI. That camera and that computer and that POS system is going to need a cable plugged into it, and we'll be ready to be the one doing it.
But you won't be running the cable in New Jersey. You're designing.
No, we can't scale fast enough to get out there. So there's a lot of really good national companies that can perform the rollout work. We think we can scale fast on the design and survey side from here in Northwest Arkansas. And again, with that same grit and determination that we take into everything, we're doing that in design. So we've taken 14-day designs that, Walmart will give you a design. They'll say you have 14 days to do it, and they'll have it back in 3 hours. And that same Ponte Las Pilas part of custom electronics is working really well on the design side.
And then, is all of your work here in Northwest Arkansas? Is any of it out of the state or?
Yeah, we've been drug out of the state, willingly drug, but still drug out of the state a lot over the last couple of years. We've had grocery chain work in Mississippi and Louisiana. We've been in Memphis, Tennessee some. I think there's a team in Denver today that's working a lot in Oklahoma. So no, we used to say that all of it happened in these 4 counties, but if you've got great dog food, again, people want it in other states, and we've got some licensing stuff to work through to be able to roll that out fast. Because we deal in alarms and access control and cameras, we've got to make it through state police, background checks, and fingerprints on everybody. And every state has a different approach to what those licenses look like. And so our ability to scale and get a truck in New Jersey to pull cable just isn't there. But we're continuing to try to spread our wings. I think the hope is that we stay with a single geographic location. Just like Sam said, we're right dead smack in the middle of the country. And so we should be able to control the Midwest from here.
Yeah, talk more about the future.
Yeah.
So you're saying, keep the headquarters here. Is like more national growth part of the vision and goals for the future, or is it let's just get better at the new technology that's coming out, or we want to double our people size? What's the vision for the growth?
Yeah, I think growth has kind of always done its thing. We've averaged 34% since 2020.
Holy cow.
We're 10x what we were when I started in 2014. We think we're involved in all the cool stuff that's happening in Northwest Arkansas, but we still have less than 1% of the market share. So there's still a ton of growth to be had in Northwest Arkansas. A lot of our competition, particularly on the residential side, is, Larry's cousin that has a ladder can put the technology in your house too. And he's going to be cheaper than we are. Mm-hmm. Larry's cousin might not be available on Saturday afternoon when you have a wine event at your house and you need your audio to work. So we're constantly battling what we call the trunk slammer side of the residential market. And then we have a lot of national competition in Northwest Arkansas. These are billion-dollar companies with resources we don't have. We've done a good job keeping them at bay with our current clientele.
Yep.
And I think one of the things that I haven't touched on is we didn't have a sales department until 2023. 100% of the sales was either Victor or myself.
Wow.
And we kind of thought naively that you had to have our industry knowledge to be able to sell something to somebody. And the reality is that you can talk technology to an end user better than I can, because I tend to start to tech speak. You want to ask me what time it is, and I want to tell you how the clock's made.
Yeah.
And we added a sales department in 23. We've had some great success. Sales employees are a different breed. You can't lead folks in sales the same way you can lead technicians. Mm-hmm. And that's been tough to learn. But we're going after different verticals we've never been in. I think the K-12 market is something we've historically not played in. As AI continues to happen in cameras, we feel like we have a seat at the table to help with shooter events or lockdown events, weather events. Mm-hmm. I think the Woodland Junior High is a project we were on the design team for. Modus came to us and said, hey, Fayetteville's going to have some very specific technology that they need in this school, and we need to hire your firm to sit on the design team. That rolls into construction, so we're under contract to provide all of the technology for that as well. And now I think we're going to actually have the opportunity to do Ramey now that we made it past the city council event, which owned Northwest Arkansas for the last 6 months.
Yeah.
I think if you would have asked my wife on what was the most important thing that happened this week, it would not have been business or this podcast. It would have been that city hall meeting on Tuesday night.
They were able to build a school.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, both those are going to be beautiful projects. I mean, that's and they're
amazing. Projects my kids will go to.
Yeah.
So I think that's the real secret to sitting in front of a school superintendent or their technology guys to say, hey, I dropped my kids off at Happy Hollow Elementary this morning in Fayetteville. I'm pretty concerned with what the safety's like in these schools. And, in that particular Woodland job, we had the relationship with the architect, which got us to the school. We had the relationship with the general contractor and the electrical contractor. And that's kind of the story of how all of the projects happen. It's a relationship.
Mm. So you talked through the national competition here.
Yeah.
And I know we briefly talked outside. Doesn't seem like the regional competition is more one-off.
Right.
And I asked you why, and you said, well, private equity has just kind of gobbled up our industry.
Right.
And so, I mean, I think it would be safe to assume y'all have had opportunities or will have opportunities to be acquired. So why haven't you done that?
Yeah, that's a very both personal and multifactional conversation. They do come in waves. If I stopped and checked my email right now, there's probably 10 emails asking to have a conversation. We became the flavor of the week shortly after the HVAC industry kind of ran through its thing. But I can't speak for the competition and the decisions that they made. What I can say is that I hold the culture of this company in my hands every day. It's a strange company. You guys saw the banners hanging in the warehouses. We kind of own who we are, and you can't replicate that.
There's a realness to it, is what it feels like as we're walking through.
I hope so. I think, I do my best when I'm underestimated. In fact, I kind of lean into being underestimated. It's my goal. It's part of my aesthetics. I don't look like the CEO of a company this size. I'm always thrilled to hear things like, there's no chance that residential company is going to be able to do the ledger. One fun story. In 22, we had finally grown enough to needing to add an extra accounting person. And we told the accounting folks, hey, go ahead, do the first round interviews, and then I'll do the final interviews. So I generally aesthetically don't match my role at Custom Electronics. Usually I have a collar on today because my wife told me I needed a collar on today. But it's normally a Dodgers hat and a T-shirt and some work boots, and that's what I do every day. So this sweet lady comes in. She's probably 55 years old. I'm the only person in the office that day, and she says, I'm here for an interview with John. And I said, well, I'm John. It's nice to meet you. And she looks me up and down and says, probably the other John. And and the joy that it brought me in that moment. I love being underestimated. Right now the design work that we're doing is all against national competitors, and they're freaking out, wondering what this ragtag bunch out of Lowell, Arkansas is up to. But and that probably stems from, as a child, we moved so much from city to city to city that I never really was concerned with what the other kids thought about me, because in 6 months I wasn't going to see them anyways. And I really love being underestimated in business. I find ways to be underestimated because it creates a hunger and a competitiveness in me that works out really well.
Well, it shows. I mean, kind of back to us just walking through the office here, an hour ago, whenever that was. I think this is our 32nd episode, maybe. Nice. So we've walked through quite a few offices now. This place is immaculate. Yeah. I mean, it is probably the cleanest place we've walked through, and just down to how things are been placed on the shelf in the warehouse. Yeah. I mean, the way the spacing is between the lettering. I mean, I think the hard part outside looking in at what y'all do is you have to, it has to be right. If you turn the system on, it doesn't work, we're gonna, I mean, even if it's one, we forgot one wire or whatever, it's like, people are like, I'm not using you again. That's like, that's my response would be. But like, and you can tell that y'all live that. Like, if I came in here as a customer, I'd be like, man, this is it.
Yeah, first of all, I try my hardest to have my hands in everything that they're doing and what the signage looks like and how clean the trucks are. And before you guys got here, I was walking the yard looking at trucks to make sure that their ladders on top were in the right order and that the lettering was there and nothing was peeling. And when you call Custom Electronics, from the moment you get Ashley at the front counter until the moment you get your invoice, every part of it paints a picture of what Custom Electronics is. I try to tell the sales team all the time that if you get a lead that comes through the phone and that lead gets handed to you, the speed at which you reply to that lead is going to set the tone for what they think about Custom Electronics. And how great your truck looks when you arrive there, if you have good-looking company swag on at that point. The installers should already have the plate set for them by everybody else up until that point. And the building obviously fits that way. I've always lived by your inbox looks about as clean as your desktop looks. And I'm kind of known for not wanting stuff sitting around or for things to be a certain way. But there's a level of PR to it as well. We need our warehouse to be as organized as our rack will be in your house full of equipment.
Yeah.
So
getting towards the end here, but I want people to understand when you're going into a house, sure, I mean, these homes have gotten a lot more luxurious sure the demand on your end has gotten higher of like, as far as what's the standard. The standard is a design. I feel like in Northwest Arkansas has gotten higher, like the way things are built. But like on your end, what are you seeing when you're walking into a residential home?
Yeah, interest rates have affected how much of our technology can fit in a house right now, but we kind of led in the early years with complexity, and you need this home theater and it needs to do 25 different things. And what we've kind of refined over the years is that we're trying to sell convenience more than anything. So, I've got a 10-year-old that plays baseball and he has practice and it ends at 9:30. And when I get home, my options are make sure the garage door's closed, then go draw all the shades, then adjust the thermostat, then lock the door, then change the lights, then turn off the music, or push a button that says bedtime. And if it's not a necessity, but once you live with it, it's hard to not live with it. We were in Seaside a couple months ago, and I remember laying down in bed and the bathroom light was still on in this house we had rented, and I went to grab my phone and I was like, oh God, I got to get up and turn this light off. And I'll tell you, 1998, John would have punched me in the face for thinking the way that I thought in that moment. But it really is, when you've got a family that's moving as fast as our family is moving, or a lot of our clients, or you have two executives in a home that are just kind of running past each other all the time. Anything you can do to simplify the home with as complex of technology as possible. It's really cool to live in a house that's fully integrated. At the moment where you decide, hey, we're going to leave, and you want to hit a button that says adios, and make sure that whatever your kids left on, or the music's there, or the thermostats need to be adjusted. It just creates simplicity through very, very complex systems.
Can you talk about, and we can cut this off if you want to, but like, can you talk about what an average order value for something, like if someone's listening, they're like, man, that sounds like super fancy, and maybe they just have never heard the numbers before. Maybe it's not as expensive as they think it is, or obviously everything's custom. So if you have the shades and blah, 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 but like, what's an average house?
Full package.
Yeah.
Sure.
Is that
we have packages for the builders. So you take a house in Scissortail subdivision, that house comes with 4 zones of audio. Master bath is the new hottest topic of audio, something that we didn't see coming, where homeowners are saying, hey, we bought this house and it had speakers in the master bedroom, but not in the master bathroom. And I don't hang out in the bedroom.
Jamming in the shower.
You're jamming in the shower. Yeah. So the package that we're putting forth to these builders has a pretty good Wi-Fi package, 4 zones of audio, a home alarm, a video doorbell, and maybe 1 or 2 smart light switches to control the outside lights. And the builders are paying $12,000, $13,000, $14,000 for that. Some folks will move into the house, love the system, and that's the end of the road. The majority of them will buy the home, say, hey, we've got 4 TVs we'd like to have you hang, and will you make my kids' Xbox work without cables everywhere? And from that point, the average ticket, $5,000, $6,000, goes up to $700,000, $800,000, $900,000 in a home if you want to get fully automated in a really large home. We don't see very much of those, particularly this time of year, or in this current economic season. But it's not unheard of for somebody to say, hey, I've got $80,000. Can that get me pathway lighting to and from my garage to my bedroom, integrate my thermostats, maybe a couple door locks, and I'd like 3 cameras on the outside of the house.
And those are like nice cameras?
Yeah, it's the best of the best.
Okay. And do y'all use different cameras in commercial than you do in residential?
We do, yeah. Okay. So the analytics that are coming out of cameras right now, when I first got into the trade, I would sell you cameras because a bad guy was going to do something at some point. We called them security cameras. And that's just not what they are anymore. We're using analytics on our residential cameras to send you a message when there's a package sitting on the porch. So the analytics can say, I know that's a cardboard box, and send you a text message that there's a box sitting there. It could tell the difference between human and animal. It could tell the color of a vehicle. So we've got one customer that says, hey, my landscaper drives a red truck. I would like to know anytime a red truck comes in my driveway. And then we push a notification to them for that. The analytics in the commercial side need to be far more robust. So we're trying to provide, what's the temperature this piece of equipment in a poultry facility is running at, or how many people walk through the front door of this store and what's their average height, or are they male or female?
Wow.
So the analytics that are getting pushed out of this camera are pretty incredible. Now we're getting into visual weapon detection, whereas the camera can say, that's a brandish weapon. I know it's a brandish weapon. And when I see that, I'm going to send a notification to the school resource officer, and I'm going to lock down all of these doors and move forward. So the analytics on the camera have really taken them from being a investigative tool after something happens to being a preventative tool in most settings.
And like, what's a camera like that cost? The hardware,
Sure. In the warehouse right now, there's cameras that do the analytics that cost $500. There's cameras in the warehouse right now that are thermal and can see 2,000 feet, and those are $30,000.
And where would those be? Like in a Walmart parking lot, or where would something?
Yeah, if you're trying to protect the perimeter around the runways at an airport.
Okay.
If you're in a correctional facility. If you've got the means and you've got a big piece of property and you just want to know there's no humans on it, the human detection part of the thermal cameras is there. When our commercial cameras are called a Visualon, it's a Motorola product, and the bowl of Reynolds Razorback Stadium used to have close to 200 PTZ cameras. So that means pan, tilt, zoom. There's a joystick, and underneath the field, there's a command center where the security folks are sitting. Well, if a fight broke out in the student section, the person from UAPD would zoom in and then dispatch the people to go do it. But when he zoomed in, he was losing the rest of what was happening. There are now 4 cameras doing the work of all of those cameras.
Wow.
It's just what technology has been able to do just in the last 2 years with cameras is pretty amazing.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So kind of back to, the headquarters is here in Lowell. Mm-hmm. The business is here in Northwest Arkansas. What you're saying is, hey, that's what we see for the future. Maybe we keep growing outside, but Heartbeat's here. This is something we ask all of our guests, but so if you're sitting down with someone who wants to build a business in Northwest Arkansas, what do you tell them? Why build a business in Northwest Arkansas?
Yeah, for me, this still very much has a small town feel. You're always just one connection away from every deal. You and I talked about it earlier. My architect on my home is your architect on your project, and we had never met before that. So it seems like in the business community, we still have that Mayberry vibe of, you might not know everybody involved in the deal, but you can get to them pretty quick. And in a market that's growing the way ours is, if you put 3% inflation on top of 7.5% growth, if we're not doing 10.5% growth, we're shrinking in size, and the next custom electronics is coming after us at that point. And there's so much talent getting pushed out of the high schools right now with technology from either the coding side or hey, I just grew up with a laptop and I really like this thing. The next Victor and Daphne is possible. And if we don't keep racing up the ladder, they're going to catch us and surpass us. So the part about Northwest Arkansas that I enjoy the most is that we're still personal enough to where people appreciate what you're doing. I'll tell you one funny story. The week that COVID started, I got a call from Jordan Wright. And if you've ever gotten a call from Jordan, you got to kind of have a flow chart for what he's trying to tell you, because he's all over the place. And he called and he said, hey, what are you doing? And I said, no, I'm at the office. What do you need, buddy? I got an emergency. I said, okay, how can I help you? I'll call you back. And then he didn't call me back. And then 2 hours later, I called him. I was like, hey, what's the emergency? What do you need? Oh, yeah. Can you come to Lowell or can you come to Johnson? I need Wi-Fi. I said, well, you got pretty good Wi-Fi. And he said, no, we're shutting down the dining room and we're going to cut a hole in this wall and we're going to create a drive-through because I think that drive-throughs are going to be a necessity with this sickness that's going around. And, our ability to lean on that personal relationship with him and him know that if he had a need, we were going to come running.
And figure it
That
out.
afternoon, we had Wi-Fi stood up in the parking lot, and he had created a traffic route for people to come through and get their food. And there's a downside to this, which is if we're not great at what we do, I don't want to be seen at my kid's baseball game. Mm-hmm. You're only as good as what that person perceives your company to be. And so in this small town vibe where you see customers at every restaurant or your kids go to school with a customer, you got to really stay on top of your game. It'd be lonely to be the guy that was ducking and hiding his face because his project didn't go really well.
Yeah.
So,
well, in that, keeping the good reputation. I mean, I think there's a different definition for everybody here, but how do you define success for you, for the company? How do you define success?
Yeah, I think it changes its definition as we get older. One of my favorite stories to tell is that I was with a plumber who said, hey, you know what Miss Daphne told me? She said that success meant that she had a room in her house for the washing machine, that she had never lived in a house that had a laundry room, and that's what true success meant. And I think that as you're coming up in business, there's a lot of really superficial things that success means. I can go to the grocery store and buy the food I want without looking at the price, or I'm not making financial decisions, but those things fade pretty fast. I think that moment in that poultry plant where I saw Adrian beaming because he remembered working in the poultry plant, or the amount of life change we've been able to create with the organization. If I get to the end of this journey and I have a list of folks whose lives were better internally because of it, then I think that that's what I'll consider success.
So good. Well, one of the things we do at the end of every episode is we try to capture and condense what we learned from you today and what we think our listeners are going to learn. Whether you're growing a business, you own a business, you're starting a business, you want to be a business owner one day, these are all super applicable to you. Execution, I think, is the first one. And like I said, we've interviewed 32 people now, and everybody's got sales, marketing, and then some are just pure, like, we are going to execute. And you captured it well. Think of the PBS guys saying the same thing when they're walking down a grocery aisle and they see a client, they see a customer. They want that customer to view them as an excellent service provider. And I think you captured that really well. You just want to have the best product or service. The dog food saying captured it really well. And so I think it doesn't matter if you can sell or you can market if you can't deliver an excellent product. And so I think that's a big thing I learned, big thing we learned, and our listeners are going to learn. I think the second thing, and it has gotten lost over time, is just this idea of hard work. And that those words mean different things to different people, but I think the kind of saying that captured it well that I'll take out of this is you don't know the work that goes into anything is possible, right? Like anything's possible. You have no idea how much work went into that. You have no idea how much work went into that project. When you're driving by it, and we're driving by a huge building and we're like, man, there's a lot of technology. You have no clue how many overtime hours went into that, how many late nights went into that. So I think that's really special, and it doesn't matter what business you're in. If you want to grow and you want to do things excellently, like we just talked about, it's going to require a lot of hard work. So love that. And then I think the last piece that's very unique to this business, you, John, and just being here today is the culture. And that'll be probably the biggest personal takeaway for me. I look at some of these pictures on the wall of guys whose life looks completely different than when they started here. And I think That is what makes Northwest Arkansas special. That is the reason why we're doing this podcast. And I mean, it's just amazing. Like people's lives being changed through businesses. And Cameron and I believe that business in Northwest Arkansas is the greatest culture driver. If we have a lot of healthy businesses, a lot of healthy CEOs, a lot of healthy business owners shepherding people in Northwest Arkansas, we're going to have a thriving economy. We're going to have a thriving place to live. And so you get to do that. You have over 100 people that you get to do that with. And so thank you for doing that. It's just really awesome to be here today. So thanks for your time, John.
Yeah, thanks for hanging.
If people want to get in touch with Custom Electronics or you, what's the best way?
Yeah, I think the website's probably the best option. There's LinkedIn, but customelectronics.com. Call, stop by, follow a truck where they're going. Whatever it takes to get a hold of us.
Well, thanks, John.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, guys.